Welcome back to Fresh Outlook, everybody. I'm Logan Crawford. Prince's death is linked possibly to opiate drug use. A star struck down while still shining brightly. But his death, blamed on opiates, is not the first and likely will not be the last we heard of, especially on the Hollywood scene. Let's say hello to our panel of experts. I am joined by Dr. Jackie Guzda, Tom Gagliano, life coach and published author, Dmitri Oster, program director of a large and dynamic community-based outpatient treatment program in Brooklyn called One World Counseling. Tom, I will begin with you. What is the attraction of opiates and why are we hearing about them suddenly so much?
Well, first of all, it's really not just about the opiates, it's about the personalities that become addicted to these things. You know, when you talk about Prince, you're talking about a kid that at 7 years old had divorced parents, and a 7-year-old doesn't say, oh gee, my parents have problems. A 7-year-old says, what's the matter with me? I must be defective, I must be unlovable. When you grow up with that kind of wound, opiates become a source of oxygen. They help you forget about your problems. And this is what happens with many people that grow up in this challenging childhood. Now, opiates are very addictive, and when people can't afford the prescription drugs, they're gonna go to heroin. It's the cheaper choice. But all of this stuff really comes from the core belief of the person. That's what gets them hooked, and that's what enables them not to stop their addiction, to stay stopped.
Okay, and by the way, the name of Tom's book is Don't Put Your Bleep in Your Kid's Diaper. Don't put your crap in your kid's diaper. Basically what Tom just said. Let's get Dmitri in on the conversation. You treat people actively at your clinic in Brooklyn. Are these type of stories that you're seeing, that people have lifetime wounds that they're trying to heal and self-medicate with by taking these opiates?
Absolutely, that's a big part of it. A lot of the individuals that we treat at my particular agency, but this is, germane to various types of treatment facilities, really are coming in with underlying psychological problems, long-standing historical issues that, for various reasons, they've never really been able to work out. And alcohol, drug abuse is just an escape. However, I would just add from my experience, this is a national epidemic. Prescription opiate drug abuse and addiction. I've seen way too many times in upstanding professional doctors, medical offices, physicians giving out opiate medication to people without really doing any kind of further investigation as to their background. And that oftentimes leads to a lot of negative unintended consequences for a person as far as we're talking about opiate addictions.
It's funny, Jackie, we think of this as a big city problem, but more and more it's being related to rural and suburban areas. Vermont, for example, has a raging problem with both opiate use and heroin use. Like Tom said, people start on the opiates, they grab them out of mom's cabinets, they can't afford them because they're more expensive than heroin. It's like a world turned upside down. Heroin was a drug we thought we eliminated in the 1970s,
That's right, and now we're hearing that people are getting bags on the street for $5. And you've had big celebrities die just from getting heroin on the street. I mean, it's insane. My question to you gentlemen is, you're both saying that people who have inner wounds turn to these drugs for an escape. What about the biological factor?
There's always the nature-nurture, but I talk more about the piece that comes from the lack of nurturing as a child. And we talk about celebrities, we gotta blow that up. Addiction doesn't take hostages. It doesn't make a difference if you're born in a wealthy family, a poor family, what your ethnicity is, or what your religion is. If you grow up not feeling important, and every kid needs at least one person in their life to feel important to, it doesn't make a difference. Power, money, and prestige was never powerful enough to stop an addiction. Never was. That's why you see what you see today.
That brings us back to the experiment with the two monkeys. You had the cloth monkey, who was the nurturing mother, and you had the wire cold mother, who gave milk to that baby monkey. And the baby monkey would go get the milk from the cold mother, but run back to the nurturing cloth mother.
Dmitri, good point that people need both love and sustenance in order to survive and make their way through the world. How difficult is it to kick the habit? Is it worse than quitting cigarettes?
That's a good question. Opiate-based substances, prescriptions are incredibly addictive, regardless even if a person has an addiction history or not. It's not easy. And I would say that there are both psychological biological components that go into fueling a person's addiction.
Because people have a predisposition to being an addict, where you'll have a family member, all the kids are raised in the same environment, one will become a successful person, perhaps become a workaholic, the other kid will become an alcoholic, right?
Absolutely, yes. There is, of course, the genetic predisposition towards developing substance abuse addictions. That's definitely there, certainly the case for opiates. But again, I just want to underscore the point, and Tom mentioned this as well, that these are incredibly powerful substances. Basically, these synthetic opioids, this is heroin in a pill. Bottom line. And when they're so freely distributed to the general population from usually well-intentioned doctors and physicians, this can help explain some of the epidemic that we've been seeing across our country when it comes to opiate abuse and addiction. How many clients and patients do we have in our treatment program where we hear the same narrative? This was somebody who was a straight A student, perhaps involved in sports. They were doing well in their life, of various ages and backgrounds as well. Addiction does not discriminate at all whatsoever.
The feeling of these drugs, I've only taken one Vicodin once. I had some minor surgery done. The doctor gave me Vicodin. I took the Vicodin, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't move. I was so numb. It was like 5 martinis. So you can understand if you are predisposed why someone might continue. I put aside the bottle and never took another Vicodin again. I said, I'll live with the pain. I don't want to feel like I'm out of control like this. Do you see this among your students, Jackie? Or is it too hard to tell whether these kids are using drugs or not?
It's really hard to tell because in essence, I see them coming in hungover a lot, and I have taught at places where I have kids who, for instance, Mother's Day is tomorrow. I had kids clinging to me on Mother's Day because, this one fellow told me a story. He was raised in the projects, and then his mother was turning tricks, but I loved her, and then she died, and all of that. And I always wonder about kids like that, and what can we do? What can we do besides just going into treatment like that? How can we nip it in the bud?
Some of these high-profile cases that we see, Philip Seymour Hoffman, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson, now possibly Prince, do they serve the purpose of raising the consciousness of Americans to this problem?
I think it does, but for me, I facilitate groups for recovering addicts. And the addiction, believe it or not, they call it oxygen. It becomes oxygen to them. They need that like you need oxygen. Right? And you'll do anything to get oxygen. Well, that's what the addiction is. They do anything to get their addiction. When they start to get sober, they realize it's not oxygen. But while they're going through this phase, the key for me is they need to connect with people again. They need to start to trust people as their coping mechanism, not the addiction. And my groups are very fortified with that, where they feel very close, and when they're struggling in life, instead of going there as their coping mechanism, they're going to the group members. That's what it's about, really. It's about, I lost trust in people as a coping mechanism. They weren't there for me. They betrayed me, and I won't trust them again, but I got to find something to make me whole, to make me big, to make me strong. That's why they're predisposed to addictions more than other people are.
Dmitri, how does your rehab work? Do you give people replacement drugs? Do they go cold turkey? Are they weaned slowly over time from their drugs? Tell me about how your system works.
Right. As far as treating opiate use disorders, I mean, everybody's treatment and recovery trajectory will really be different. We really do individualize and tailor treatment to the individual. But I just want to kind of piggyback a little bit on what Tom said as well, because I think it is so important and relevant, this thing about a sober social support system. This works wonders for individuals. Group therapy, group counseling, just a fellowship of peers, understanding peers. I've seen this work much better than even replacement medications, quite honestly. And I believe in it actually more, personally speaking.
So to get up there like Alcoholics Anonymous, admit you're an addict, admit you have a problem, talk about the trials and tribulations of trying to stay sober, that kind of thing is extremely useful.
Extremely useful and extremely helpful. Yes, in the right environment, in the trusting environment, in the safe environment, this does wonders for individuals. There's so many people in treatment walking around years, decades, with all types of skeletons in their closet, so to speak, and things that they're ashamed about, things that they never verbalized to another person. And if we're talking about really nipping problems in the bud before it becomes bigger, talk therapy, quite honestly, in a trusted environment of peers goes an incredibly long way.
Jackie, state after state now is either talking about legalizing marijuana or legalizing marijuana. And they're doing it in all sorts of forms, in edibles, in smoking form, in tinctures. Does that add to our drug use in the country? Because now you got the government basically sanctioning it, saying it's okay to feel comfortably numb, take this piece of candy.
Well, look, we can also say that it's the same thing for alcohol. And there are wine shops, liquor stores all over the place. You go out, you have drinks, it's socialization. I don't believe, and maybe the gentleman could contradict me, that there have been any studies that actually prove that marijuana is a gateway drug in the normal populace.
So I'll give that question to Tom, is it?
Absolutely. Most people, 90% of addicts start their addiction by the time they're 18 years old. So it's created early on in life. Most of the recovering addicts that come to my groups either did start with weed or weeded off with weed as a way to make their life less unmanageable. So I believe, again, statistics I don't know, but from what I see in my groups, there's absolutely a connection to that. And think about it, what does weed do? It changes the feeling, it medicates. So when that stops working, I need something more. Isn't that what addiction is?
And also, I don't think you'd ever find an addict who didn't start with weed, because it's almost like, cigarettes. You're not also going to find a marijuana smoker who didn't start with cigarettes. I mean, so almost all boundary issues and feelings. I mean, people drink to get a feeling, they smoke to get a rush of nicotine, and then they move on to marijuana, and then after the marijuana wears off. Is this a type of scenario that you see, Dmitri?
I hear this almost on a daily basis, anecdotally speaking, of course, but there is certainly research that bears this out, yes. I am a firm believer that marijuana is a gateway drug, especially the marijuana that's really available most of the time these days in the illicit markets. This is not pure marijuana that's grown from the ground. It's usually laced with other types of incredibly damaging psychoactive chemicals and ingredients. I've seen countless times young people smoking marijuana thinking that it's just fine, this is natural, having psychotic breaks, just losing contact with reality, not knowing that this substance is usually laced with other very harmful, damaging chemicals.
Okay, so here's the other question though. So what do we do? If we make it illegal, these people criminalize their lives by using it anyway. If we make it legal, then they're more likely to use it. It's sort of like you're darned if you don't and darned if you do, because you've got a lot of people who ruin their lives. Barack Obama is addressing this recently, and I side with him on this issue, that they're incarcerated, they become convicted criminals, they're unable to get jobs, unable to get apartments because they smoked weed.
Right. So shouldn't we as Americans have free choice? It's only these people that have these propensities towards addiction that are going to suffer from it. I mean, I bring it back to the old alcohol comparison. Because there are some people who do abuse alcohol and get into big kinds of troubles out of it, does that mean that we have to, prevent or tell people they can't use it?
And look how effective prohibition was.
Exactly.
But I guess this goes back to Dmitri and Tom's point, is that people will abuse substances, people will seek relief, people will self-medicate, but what they need is to cure this emptiness within them that makes them go from somebody who has a martini on the weekends to somebody who's drinking a half a bottle of vodka every night.
Look, addicts all have different masks, as I said. You'll have millionaires, you'll have poor, all different, but they all connect on the insides. A feeling of defectiveness, a feeling of pain inside that they're looking to change or medicate. What an addict has to understand as he's going through therapy, because they become fragmented, they're not congruent. They become split into two people. What I try to do is make them more congruent, to make them understand they're not bad people that deserve to be punished. They're discouraged people that need to allow other people to help them. When they get that message and they allow other people into their lives to help them, as we were talking about in support group, with therapists, with 12-step programs, with sponsors, and they bring their insides out, that they're more congruent, changes happen. Many positive changes happen, but it's the trust piece. They don't trust a process they can't control.
Tom Gagliano, Dmitri Oster, Jackie Guzda, thanks so much for your time and your insight on this very important topic. When we come back, it is time for The Lightning Round.